Well, hello there, my dears. I'm Grandma Ruth, and I reckon you've settled in for a story that'll make your skin crawl. Back in the day, when I was a young thing in Hollow Hill, Ohio, I got myself tangled up in something I ain't never forgot. It was 1957, and there was this old place, the Hollow Hill Manor, that folks said was cursed. I didn't believe in ghosts back then, but what I saw that night, well, let's just say it changed me. Grab a blanket, dim the lights, and listen close to what happened when me and my friends took a dare that went all kinds of wrong. The summer of '57 was hot as blazes in Hollow Hill, Ohio, a sleepy little town where everybody knew everybody, and the biggest excitement was the Friday night dance at the VFW hall. I was 19, fresh out of high school, with my whole life ahead of me. My hair was pinned up in a victory roll, and I spent my days working the counter at Millie's soda fountain, serving cherry cokes to kids who'd spin on the stools till they were dizzy. Life was simple, predictable, even, until that one night in October when everything changed. Hollow Hill was the kind of place where gossip spread faster than wildfire. Folks loved to talk about the Hollow Hill Manor, a big, crumbling mansion on the edge of town, tucked behind a tangle of overgrown oaks and a rusty iron gate. It had been empty since the 1890s, when a fire took out half the place and killed the Hargrove family who lived there, Edward and Clara Hargrove, and their little girl, Eliza. The story went that Edward was a big-shot lawyer who made enemies faster than friends, and after the fire, folks swore the family never left. They said you could hear Clara crying at night, or see Eliza's shadow in the upstairs windows, her little hand pressed against the glass. Some even claimed Edward's ghost wandered the halls, looking for revenge on whoever started that fire. Now, I wasn't one for ghost stories. I figured it was just old folks scaring kids away from a dangerous, run-down house. But the manor had a pull, like a magnet for every teenager looking to prove they weren't afraid. That's where my best friend, Betty Lou Thompson, came in. Betty was trouble in a poodle skirt, always chasing a thrill. She had this big laugh that could fill a room, and eyes that sparkled when she got a wild idea. That October, with Halloween just a week away, she got the wildest idea yet. It was a Friday night, and we were at the drive-in, parked in my brother's beat-up Chevy, watching Creature from the Black Lagoon. The air smelled of popcorn and motor oil, and the radio was crackling with Elvis Presley's latest hit. Betty was in the back seat with her boyfriend, Tommy, whispering and giggling, while I sat up front with my sort of beau, Jimmy Malone. Jimmy was sweet but shy, always fidgeting with his glasses when he got nervous. Next to him was Eddie Kowalski, our resident class clown, who'd tagged along uninvited, as usual. Ruthie, Betty said, leaning over the seat, her ponytail bouncing. You know what'd be fun? Sneaking into the Hollow Hill Manor. I nearly choked on my soda. Are you nuts, Betty? That place is falling apart. We'd break our necks. Oh, come on, she teased, nudging me. You scared of a few ghosts? I bet there's nothing in there but cobwebs and rats. Tommy grinned, always ready to back Betty's schemes. Yeah, Ruth, don't be such a square. Let's do it. It'll be a gas. Eddie, munching on a handful of popcorn, piped up. I heard Old Man Hargrove's ghost chases folks with an axe. Chop, chop. He swung an imaginary axe, laughing like a hyena. Jimmy adjusted his glasses, looking uneasy. I dunno, guys. My ma says that place ain't right. She saw lights flickering in there last year, and nobody's lived there since forever. Betty rolled her eyes. Your ma thinks rock and roll is the devil's music, Jimmy. Come on, it's just a creepy old house. We'll go in, take a look, and be back before the second feature starts. Who's in? I should have said no. I should have listened to the knot in my stomach, but Betty had a way of making you feel like a coward if you backed down. So, I sighed and said, fine. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you. That's how we ended up piling into the Chevy, driving past the cornfields under a fat harvest moon. The closer we got to the manor, the quieter we got. Even Eddie stopped cracking jokes. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt, and soon the manor loomed ahead, its spires poking into the night sky like jagged teeth. The iron gate was half off its hinges, creaking in the wind. The air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing, though the sky was clear. We parked a ways off and walked the rest of the way, flashlights bobbing. The manor was a wreck, broken windows, peeling paint, and vines crawling up the walls like they were trying to choke the place. The front porch sagged, and the door hung open just enough to make you wonder if someone, or something, had left it that way. Last chance to chicken out, I said, hoping someone would agree. Betty just smirked and pushed past me, her saddle shoes crunching on the gravel. Don't be such a wet rag, Ruthie. Let's go. Inside, the air was thick with dust and a sour, musty smell, like wet leaves left to rot. Our flashlights cut through the dark, lighting up a grand foyer with a cracked marble floor and a staircase that curved up into shadows. A chandelier hung overhead, its crystals dulled by grime, swaying slightly though there wasn't a breeze. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling away to show the bones of the house. "Geez," Eddie whispered, his voice echoing. "This place gives me the heebie-jeebies." "Shut up, Eddie," Betty hissed, but even she sounded nervous now. We moved deeper, our footsteps loud in the silence. The parlor was next, with heavy drapes that blocked out the moonlight and furniture covered in dusty sheets. There was an old piano in the corner, its keys yellowed like old teeth. Tommy, trying to act tough, sat down and banged out a few notes. The sound was sour, and it echoed way too long, like the house was holding on to it. "Knock it off, Tommy," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Something about that piano made my skin crawl. Betty found a big mirror on the wall, its frame carved with creepy little cherubs that looked more like gargoyles. She wiped the dust off with her sleeve and grinned at her reflection. "Hey, maybe we should have a seance or something. Call up old man Hargrove." "Don't even joke about that," Jimmy muttered, clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. But Betty, being Betty, started chanting in a fake spooky voice. "Oh, spirits of Hollow Hill, show yourselves." She laughed, but it died fast when the mirror seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it, a shadow in the glass, tall and thin, with no face, just two glowing spots where eyes should have been. "Betty, move." I grabbed her arm, yanking her back. We all stared at the mirror, our breaths loud in the quiet. The shadow was gone, but the air felt colder, heavier, like the house was watching us. "What the heck was that?" Eddie squeaked, his bravado gone. "Let's get out of here," Jimmy said, already backing toward the door. But Betty, stubborn as ever, shook her head. It was nothing. Probably just the light. "Come on, let's check upstairs." I wanted to argue, but the others were already following her, and I wasn't about to be left alone. The staircase creaked under our weight, each step feeling like a warning. Upstairs was a long hallway lined with doors, some half open, leading to dark rooms that smelled of mildew. The wallpaper here was torn, and there were scratches on the walls, long, deep marks that didn't look like they came from any animal. We stopped at a door at the end of the hall, different from the others. It was heavy oak, carved with strange symbols that made my eyes hurt to look at. Betty reached for the knob, but before she could touch it, a low, raspy whisper filled the air. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it felt like it was saying our names, curling around us like smoke. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart hammering. "Hear what?" Tommy said, but his face was pale. The whisper came again, louder, and this time, the door creaked open an inch, like something on the other side was inviting us in. Betty froze, her hand still outstretched. For the first time, she looked scared. Guys, Jimmy said, his voice shaking. I think we should. He didn't finish. The chandelier downstairs crashed to the floor with a deafening bang, the sound echoing through the house. We screamed, stumbling back, and that's when we heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming up the stairs. Hello again, my dears. It's Grandma Ruth, back to pick up where we left off. Last time, I told you about the night me and my friends snuck into the Hollow Hill Manor, thinking we were so brave. But when that chandelier crashed and we heard those footsteps coming up the stairs, well, let's just say we weren't feeling so tough anymore. That old house had secrets, and it wasn't keen on letting us leave without showing us a few. Settle in, keep the lights on, and listen to what happened next in that cursed place. The air in the Hollow Hill Manor was thick, like we were breathing through a wet blanket. The crash of the chandelier downstairs still echoed in my ears, and those footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, were getting closer. We stood frozen in the upstairs hallway, our flashlights trembling in our hands. The oak door with those strange carvings loomed at the end of the hall, still cracked open an inch, like it was daring us to look inside. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it'd bust right out of my chest. What do we do? Jimmy whispered, his glasses fogging up from how fast he was breathing. Hide. Betty hissed, her usual swagger gone. She grabbed Tommy's arm and yanked him toward one of the side rooms. Eddie, for once not cracking jokes, scrambled after them. I hesitated, my eyes locked on that door. Something about it felt alive, like it was watching us. But the footsteps were almost at the top of the stairs, so I bolted after my friends, my saddle shoes slipping on the dusty floor. We ducked into a room that must have been a bedroom once. There was a sagging four-poster bed with moth-eaten curtains, a cracked vanity mirror, and a wardrobe that looked like it could swallow you whole. We crammed ourselves behind the wardrobe, squeezing into the narrow space, barely breathing. The smell of mildew and something sharp, like burnt hair, stung my nose. Our flashlights were off now, and the only light came from the moonlight seeping through a broken window, casting long, twisted shadows across the floor. The footsteps stopped right outside the room. I clamped a hand over my mouth, afraid even my breathing would give us away. Betty was pressed against me, her nails digging into my arm. Tommy was muttering something under his breath, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. Eddie was shaking so hard I could feel the wardrobe vibrating. Jimmy, poor Jimmy, looked like he was about to faint. Then we heard it, a low, raspy hum, like someone trying to sing through a throat full of dust. It wasn't a tune I recognized, but it made my skin crawl, like nails on a chalkboard. The humming moved closer, and the door to the room creaked open. I peeked through a crack between the wardrobe and the wall, my heart in my throat. There was nothing there. No figure, no shadow, just the open doorway and that awful humming filling the air. But the shadows on the floor were moving, twisting, like they had a mind of their own. They stretched toward us, long and thin, like fingers reaching out. I wanted to scream, but I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. The humming stopped, and for a moment, it was dead quiet. Then the wardrobe door rattled, just once, like something had brushed against it. Eddie let out a tiny whimper, and I shot him a look that said, "Shut up or we're dead." The shadows retreated, and the air seemed to lighten, like whatever was there had moved on. We waited, huddled together, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. "Is it gone?" Jimmy whispered, his voice barely audible. "I think so," Tommy said, but he didn't sound sure. Betty, trying to regain her nerve, crawled out first. "Come on, you chickens. We can't stay here all night." I grabbed her arm. "Betty, we need to leave. This place isn't right." She shook me off, but her eyes were wide, betraying her bravado. "We're fine. Let's just see what's behind that door, then we'll go. I'm not running home with my tail between my legs." Against my better judgment, we crept back into the hallway. The oak door was still ajar, and the air around it felt colder, heavier. The footsteps had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the drapes, made me jump. Tommy pushed the door open, his flashlight shaking. The room beyond was small, not like the grand spaces downstairs. It was a study, maybe, with bookshelves lining the walls, their shelves sagging under moldy books. A heavy desk sat in the center, covered in papers and a thick layer of dust. Above the desk hung a portrait, half covered by a tattered curtain. Betty pulled the curtain aside, and we all gasped. It was a painting of a woman, Clara Hargrove, I guessed. She was beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair piled high, but her eyes were cold, almost cruel. The paint was cracked, but those eyes seemed to follow us, like she was staring right through our souls. Under the portrait was a brass plaque that read, Clara Hargrove, 1885. She doesn't look like a ghost, Eddie said, trying to sound tough but failing miserably. Shut up, Eddie, Betty snapped. She was rifling through the papers on the desk, her flashlight beam darting across yellowed pages. Look at this, old letters, maybe? I leaned over her shoulder. The papers were brittle, some crumbling at the touch. Most were legal documents, deeds and contracts, signed by Edward Hargrove. But one caught my eye, a letter in elegant, looping handwriting, addressed to Clara. It was dated 1890, the year of the fire. I read it aloud, my voice shaking. My dearest Clara, I fear we have angered something ancient. The relic we found in the cellar is no mere trinket. It whispers to me at night, promising power but demanding sacrifice. I beg you, destroy it before it consumes us all. Edward? What relic? Jimmy asked, his voice high-pitched. I don't know, but it sounds bad, I said, my stomach churning. We shouldn't be messing with this stuff. Betty, of course, wasn't listening. She was already poking around the desk, opening drawers that squeaked in protest. In one, she found a small, locked box, no bigger than a jewelry case, carved with the same strange symbols as the door. It was made of dark wood, polished to a shine despite the dust everywhere else. When she picked it up, the temperature in the room dropped so fast I could see my breath. Put that down, Betty, I said, grabbing for the box. She yanked it away. Relax, Ruthie. It's just a box. Maybe there's something valuable inside. Before I could stop her, she shook it, and something inside rattled, something heavy, like a stone. The moment she shook it, the portrait above the desk tilted, like someone had bumped it. We all froze, staring as it swung back and forth, creaking on its hook. Okay, that's it, Tommy said, his voice cracking. We're leaving. But as he turned, the door slammed shut with a bang that shook the walls. The flashlights flickered, and that humming started again, louder now, coming from all around us. It wasn't just a sound, it felt like it was inside my head, clawing at my thoughts. The box in Betty's hands vibrated, and she dropped it with a yelp. It hit the floor but didn't break, just sat there, the symbols glowing faintly in the dark. Open the door. Eddie screamed, pounding on it. But it wouldn't budge, like it was sealed with cement. Jimmy was hyperventilating, muttering, this is bad, over and over. I grabbed the box off the floor, thinking maybe putting it back would stop whatever was happening. But when I touched it, my fingers burned, not hot, but cold, like I'd plunged them into ice water. I dropped it, and the humming turned into a voice, low and guttural, speaking words I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. The portrait fell off the wall with a crash, glass shattering across the floor. In its place, the wall behind it cracked, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a leather-bound book, its cover embossed with the same symbols as the box. Betty, always too curious for her own good, reached for it. "Don't!" I shouted, but it was too late. She opened the book, and a gust of wind tore through the room, though every window was shut. The pages flipped on their own, stopping on a drawing of a circle filled with those symbols, surrounding what looked like a jagged stone. Underneath was a single word in red ink: curse. The voice grew louder, and now I could make out words. "You woke it. You pay the price." The air felt electric, like just before a lightning strike. Shadows moved in the corners of the room, not cast by any of us. They were tall, shapeless, with those glowing eyes I'd seen in the mirror downstairs. They didn't move toward us, just watched, like they were waiting for something. Betty slammed the book shut, her face white as a sheet. Okay, I'm sorry," she said, like she was apologizing to the house itself. The door creaked open, just an inch, but it was enough to snap us out of our panic. Tommy grabbed Betty's hand, and we ran, stumbling over the broken glass and out into the hallway. The shadows followed, not chasing but gliding, always just out of reach. We made it to the stairs, our flashlights flickering like they were about to die. The house groaned around us, like it was alive and angry. Downstairs, the foyer was a mess, glass from the chandelier everywhere, the air thick with dust. We didn't stop to look, just bolted for the front door. It opened easily this time, like the house was letting us go. We ran into the night, the cold October air hitting us like a slap. The Chevy was where we left it, and we piled in, Tommy gunning the engine before we'd even shut the doors. Nobody spoke on the drive back to town. Betty was clutching the book, she'd grabbed it in her panic, and the box was in my lap, though I don't remember picking it up. Jimmy was crying quietly, and Eddie was staring out the window, his usual grin gone. I kept looking back at the manor, half expecting to see those glowing eyes in the windows. When we got to the drive-in, the movie was still playing, but none of us cared. We parked and sat there, trying to make sense of what happened. Betty broke the silence, her voice small. "What was that thing?" "I don't know," I said, "but we shouldn't have taken this." I held up the box, its symbols still faintly glowing. "We need to get rid of it," Jimmy said. "And that book. They're bad news." But Betty, stubborn as ever, shook her head. "We need to know what it is first. Maybe it's worth something. Worth getting us killed." Tommy snapped, his hand still shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know what to think. All I knew was that the manor wasn't done with us. I could still feel those eyes, that voice, like it had followed us out. And deep down, I knew we'd stirred something up, something that wasn't going to let us walk away so easy. Well, hello again, my dears. It's Grandma Ruth, and I hope you're ready for the next piece of this spooky tale. Last time, I told you how me and my friends ran out of the Hollow Hill Manor, hearts pounding, with that strange box and book in tow. We thought we'd escaped, but let me tell you, that old house wasn't done with us, not by a long shot. Something followed us out that night, something angry. Grab a cup of cocoa, pull up a chair, and listen to what happened when the shadow's wrath came knocking. The Chevy's engine roared as we sped away from the Hollow Hill Manor, the harvest moon glaring down like an accusing eye. Nobody spoke. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the tires and Jimmy's occasional sniffle. Betty was clutching that leather-bound book like it was a lifeline, her knuckles white. The carved wooden box sat in my lap, its strange symbols cold under my fingers. I wanted to chuck it out the window, but something held me back, like if I let it go, it'd find its way back to me. We pulled into the drive-in, where the second feature of Creature from the Black Lagoon was still flickering on the big screen. The lot was full of cars, kids laughing and necking, oblivious to what we'd just been through. Tommy parked in the back, away from the crowd, and cut the engine. The radio crackled with Buddy Holly's "That'll Be the Day," but it felt wrong, like the music was mocking us. "What do we do with this stuff?" I asked, holding up the box. Its weight felt heavier than it should, like it was pressing down on my soul. "Burn it," Jimmy said, his voice shaky. "That book, the box, they're cursed. You saw what happened in there." Betty rolled her eyes, but it was half-hearted. "Don't be dramatic, Jimmy. It's just old junk. Maybe it's worth something. My cousin knows a guy in Cleveland who deals in antiques." "Antiques?" Tommy snapped, turning in the driver's seat. "Betty, that thing made the house go nuts. You heard that voice, you woke it. You pay the price. That ain't no antique." Eddie, who'd been quiet for once, spoke up. "I say we take it to Father O'Malley at St. Mary's. He'll know what to do. My ma says he's dealt with weird stuff before." I nodded. Eddie's right. This isn't something we mess with. We need to get rid of it, properly. Betty sighed, flipping open the book. The pages were yellowed, some stuck together with what looked like wax. "Fine, but let's at least see what's in here first. Maybe it explains what that relic is." "Betty, don't," I started, but she was already turning pages. The air in the car got cold, like someone had opened a freezer door. The radio static spiked, drowning out Buddy Holly with a low, guttural hum, the same hum we'd heard in the manor. Betty slammed the book shut, her face pale. "Okay, maybe you're right," she whispered. That's when the box in my lap vibrated, just once, like a heartbeat. I yelped and dropped it on the floorboard. The symbols glowed faintly, then faded. Jimmy crossed himself, muttering something about Jesus and Mary. Even Eddie looked like he was praying, and that guy never set foot in church. "We're not keeping this," I said, my voice firm. "Tomorrow, we go to Father O'Malley. Until then, nobody touches this stuff." We agreed to stash the box and book at my place, since my parents were out of town visiting my aunt in Dayton. We drove to my house, a little clapboard number on Maple Street, with a picket fence and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Inside, I hid the box and book in the attic, behind an old trunk full of my grandma's quilts. I locked the attic door, but it didn't make me feel any safer. That night, I couldn't sleep. My room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every little sound feel like a threat. The wind outside sounded like whispers, and every so often, I'd hear a faint thump from the attic, like something shifting. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew better. The next morning, Saturday, we met at Millie's soda fountain to figure out our next move. The place was buzzing with kids in Letterman jackets and girls in bobby socks, the jukebox blaring jailhouse rock. But our little group was somber, huddled in a corner booth with barely touched milkshakes. Betty looked like she hadn't slept, her usual perfect ponytail fraying. Tommy kept cracking his knuckles, a nervous habit. Eddie was scarfing down fries like his life depended on it, and Jimmy just stared at his glass, pushing his glasses up every few seconds. "So, Father O'Malley," I said, trying to sound confident. "We go to him, tell him, what? That we stole stuff from a haunted house and now it's mad at us." "We don't say, haunted," Tommy said. "We say we found something weird. He's a priest. He'll get it." Betty leaned forward, her voice low. "I read more of that book last night." "You what?" I hissed, loud enough that a couple of kids at the next table glanced over. "Keep it down, Ruthie," she said. I couldn't help it. "There's stuff in there about the Hargroves. Edward was into some creepy stuff, rituals, secret societies, that kind of thing. The book mentions a relic they found when they built the manor, something buried in the land. It's supposed to be powerful, but dangerous. Like, it grants wishes, but at a cost." "What kind of cost?" Eddie asked, a fry halfway to his mouth. Betty shrugged, but her eyes were uneasy. "It didn't say exactly. Just blood. sacrifice. That sort of thing. Jimmy pushed his milkshake away. I told you, we burn it. All of it. Before we could argue more, the jukebox cut out, mid-song. The lights in the soda fountain flickered, and a cold breeze swept through, though the door was closed. Everyone in the place went quiet, looking around. Then the jukebox started again, but it wasn't Elvis. It was that same raspy hum, low and menacing, like it was coming from inside the walls. The other kids laughed it off, blaming a bad wire, but we knew better. Betty grabbed my hand under the table, her fingers ice cold. It's following us, she whispered. We left the soda fountain and headed to St. Mary's, a small brick church with a steeple that always looked like it was leaning just a bit. Father O'Malley was in his office, a kind old man with wire-rimmed glasses and a thick Irish accent. We told him a half-truth. We'd found some old stuff in an abandoned house and thought it might be trouble. I showed him the box, and Betty handed over the book, though she looked reluctant. Father O'Malley's face changed when he saw the symbols on the box. He crossed himself and muttered something in Latin. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice sharp. We exchanged glances. The old manor on the edge of town, I said finally. We were just exploring. He shook his head, his eyes dark. You've stirred something up, haven't you? These symbols, they're not Christian. They're older, darker. This book, he opened it carefully, his hands trembling. This speaks of a pact, a binding. Something was sealed in that house, and you've broken the seal. What do we do? Tommy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Leave these with me, Father O'Malley said. I'll consult with the bishop. This is beyond me. Go home, stay together, and pray. Whatever you woke, it's not happy. We left the church feeling more scared than when we'd arrived. The day was gray, with storm clouds rolling in, and the air smelled of rain and something else, something sour, like the manor. We decided to stick together at my house, figuring safety in numbers. But when we got there, the attic door was wide open, though I'd locked it tight. We crept upstairs, hearts pounding. The trunk was overturned, quilts scattered. The box and book were gone. Father O'Malley had them, so how could they be missing? But there, on the attic floor, was a new mark, a circle of those same symbols, burned into the wood like a brand. That night, the storm hit hard. Thunder shook the house, and lightning lit up the windows. We were all in my living room, trying to act normal, playing cards and listening to the radio to drown out the storm. But the radio kept cutting to static, and that hum was back, louder now, like it was coming from inside the house. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped so fast we could see our breath. Then we heard it, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the attic. The same footsteps we'd heard in the manor. Eddie dropped his cards, his face white. It's here, he whispered. Betty grabbed the fireplace poker, her hands shaking. We need to check. Are you crazy? Jimmy hissed, but Tommy was already on his feet, grabbing a flashlight. We climbed the attic stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The symbols on the floor were glowing now, pulsing like a heartbeat. And in the center of the circle stood a shadow, not a person, not a thing, just a shape, tall and thin, with glowing eyes that burned into us. The hum was deafening, and that voice spoke again, clear as day, you took what's mine. You pay the price. I don't know who screamed first, but we bolted downstairs, slamming the attic door behind us. The house shook, like something massive was moving through it. The windows rattled, and the lights went out completely, leaving us in darkness except for Tommy's flashlight. We huddled in the living room, praying, crying, anything to keep that thing away. Then the front door burst open, letting in a gust of rain and wind. Standing in the doorway was Father O'Malley, soaked to the bone, holding the box and book. His face was grim. "It's not safe here," he said. "We need to go back to the manor. Now." "Hello, my dears. It's your Grandma Ruth again, and if you've been following along, you know things got real bad after that shadow showed up in my attic." Father O'Malley bursting through the door like some kind of guardian angel, or maybe a harbinger of worse to come, changed everything. He said we had to go back to the Hollow Hill Manor, the very place we'd run from. In the pouring rain, with that thing chasing us, we had no choice. Pull up close, dim those lights, and let me tell you about the night we tried to escape the curse, and almost didn't. The storm raged outside like the devil himself was throwing a tantrum. Rain lashed the windows of my little house on Maple Street, thunder cracking so loud it rattled the china in the kitchen cabinets. Father O'Malley stood in the doorway, dripping wet, his clerical collar askew and that carved box clutched under one arm like it was a ticking bomb. The book was tucked into his coat, but I could see its edges peeking out, those symbols seeming to writhe in the lightning flashes. "Father, what in heaven's name?" Tommy started, but the priest cut him off with a raised hand, his Irish brogue thick with urgency. "No time for questions, lad. That thing up there," he jerked his thumb toward the attic stairs, where the footsteps had just stopped, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. "It's not a ghost. It's older. Hungrier. Tied to whatever's in this box. And it won't stop until the seal's remade." Betty, still gripping the fireplace poker like a baseball bat, stepped forward. "Seal? What seal? You know about this stuff." Father O'Malley's eyes darted to the attic door, which was now bulging slightly, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. I do. My grandfather was a priest in Dublin, dealt with the old ways before the church cleaned house. The Hargroves didn't just build that manor, they unearthed something buried in the hill. A relic from before the Europeans came, something the natives sealed away centuries ago. Edward Hargrove thought he could use it for power, but it twisted him. The fire wasn't an accident, it was the thing trying to contain itself. And now you've let it loose again. Jimmy, pale as milk, adjusted his glasses with trembling hands. "So, what?" "We just go back. We have to," the priest said, stepping inside and slamming the door against the wind. Water pooled at his feet. "The only way to bind it is where it was found, in the manor's cellar. We take the box and book, perform the ritual from the pages. It's risky, but staying here means it picks us off one by one." Eddie let out a nervous laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Picks us off? Like in those monster flicks at the drive-in? This ain't the Blob, Father." O'Malley fixed him with a stare that could curdle cream. "Worse, boy. Much worse. Grab your coats. We leave now, before it breaks through." We didn't argue. There was a frenzy to it all, like animals sensing a predator. Tommy fetched raincoats from the hall closet. Mine was a yellow slicker that smelled like my pa's fishing trips, and we piled the box and book into a canvas sack. The attic door groaned as we passed, and I swear I heard scratching, like claws on wood. My skin prickled, and I half expected those glowing eyes to peer through the keyhole. The Chevy's wipers slapped furiously against the rain as Tommy drove us back toward the manor. The roads were flooding, mud sucking at the tires, and lightning illuminated the cornfields like searchlights from some wartime movie. Father O'Malley sat shotgun, clutching the sack and murmuring prayers in Latin that sounded more like curses. Betty and I huddled in the back with Jimmy and Eddie, our knees knocking together. The hum was back, not in the air, but in our heads, a low buzz that made my teeth ache. "Turn up the radio," Betty said, her voice small. "Something to drown this out." Tommy flicked it on, and for a blessed moment, Fats Domino's "Blueberry Hill" filled the car, its upbeat piano a stark contrast to the nightmare we were in. But halfway through the song, the radio warped, the music twisting into that raspy hum. The singer's voice stretched into a wail, and then it was gone, replaced by static and whispers, our names, over and over, like a broken record. "Shut it off," I yelled, and Tommy did, smacking the dial hard. The manor loomed ahead sooner than I expected, its silhouette jagged against the stormy sky. The iron gate banged open on its own, as if welcoming us back. Tommy tilled the engine, and for a second, we just sat there, rain drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. "Everyone stay close," Father O'Malley said, slinging the sack over his shoulder. "And whatever you do, don't look behind you. It feeds on fear." We dashed through the gate, flashlights cutting feeble beams through the downpour. The porch steps were slick with mud, and I slipped once, scraping my knee bloody on the splintered wood. Inside, the foyer was worse than before. The chandelier wreckage had been joined by fallen beams, and the air smelled of ozone and decay, like a grave freshly dug. The priest led the way, his rosary beads clicking like a metronome. We headed straight for the parlor, but he veered
Oh, my sweet dears, we've come to the end, or have we? It's Grandma Ruth here, wrapping up this tale that's haunted me for nigh on 70 years. Last time, I told you how we barely escaped that cellar in the Hollow Hill Manor, smashing the relic and banishing those shadows back to whatever hell they crawled from. Father O'Malley said it was over, but as the sun rose on that soaked October morning in 1957, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only bought ourselves time. The real horror? It creeps in slow, like fog off the Ohio River, settling into your bones when you least expect it. Pour yourself some tea, take a deep breath, and let me finish the story, the part that still keeps me up at night. The dawn light crept over Hollow Hill like a reluctant witness, painting the cornfields in hues of gold and gray. We sat in my living room, a ragged bunch wrapped in blankets, nursing mugs of black coffee spiked with whatever whiskey my pa kept stashed in the pantry. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean, but we weren't fooling ourselves. Nothing about last night felt clean. Eddie's neck was ringed with bruises that looked like finger marks, dark and unnatural. Jimmy's glasses were cracked, and he kept wiping at them like he could erase what he'd seen. Betty and Tommy clung to each other on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her like a shield. Father O'Malley had left us with a bottle of holy water and a stern warning: bury the relic shards deep, scatter them across the county, and never speak of it again. The old ones fade but don't forget, he'd said, his eyes lingering on me longest. Especially not the ones who spilled blood to bind them. We nodded like good kids, but as soon as his tail lights faded down Maple Street, the questions bubbled up. What now? Betty asked, her voice hoarse from screaming. She looked smaller somehow, her poodle skirt rumpled and her mascara streaked like war paint. Bury the damn thing, Tommy said, practical as ever. He'd wrapped the stone shards in an old dish towel from the kitchen, the fabric already staining red where our blood had seeped through. We split them up, like the father said. One for each of us, and we take them far, different fields, different creeks. Eddie rubbed his throat, wincing. I'll take mine to the quarry out by Route 23. Deep as I can dig. Jimmy nodded, still pale. I'll do the old oak behind the school. Bury it under the roots. I volunteered for the riverbank, where the hollow creek met the bigger Ohio flow, a spot I'd picnicked at 100 times, innocent and full of fireflies in summer. Betty and Tommy would handle the rest, one in the woods behind the drive-in, the other in the churchyard under cover of dusk. It sounded simple, like dividing up chores after a barn raising. But as Tommy divvied out the wrapped shards, each one felt heavier than the last, like they carried the weight of the manor itself. We went our separate ways that afternoon, the town buzzing with post-storm chatter at Millie's soda fountain. Folks talked about flooded basements and downed lines, not a word about shadows or rituals. Life in Hollow Hill
The days blurred into a tense normalcy. Monday brought school, me back at my typing class, fingers flying over the keys to Mrs. Hargrove's old Remington